It was actually 20 years ago that I was a senior, like most of you are here, at the Henry Grady College of Journalism. But heading into my senior year, I have to be honest, I wasn't entirely sure that I wanted to be a journalist. I had dreams of becoming an actress, perhaps, or a lawyer. And it wasn't until I got into the very coveted broadcast news portion of my senior year, Hazinski's class. Back then we called it University News. And I thought, okay, well, I'll know whether or not I actually want to do this journalism thing. And it was true, and it was immediately a competition because we cycled through different parts of the newsroom. So I had to be the producer, the teleprompter runner, the cameraman, the editor, and eventually I couldn't wait for the week where I got to be a reporter. And I was looking through various newspapers, we didn't have the internet back then, to try and find a story that I could really, sink my teeth into. And I was looking in the Red and Black. Is the Red and Black still? Okay, so the Red and Black. And I saw a small little blurb of this young woman. She had a beautiful picture. It was a modeling headshot, I could tell, and she had overdosed on ecstasy and had died. And I thought, oh wow, if I could go out there and maybe talk to her roommates and bring this story to the students of the university, this could be a really compelling story. So I looked up in the phone book, because again, we didn't have computers or cell phones, and lo and behold, there was an address there. Then I pulled out the big map and went through the grid and found out how to get there. And we drove, like in between my poli-sci classes, with a camera, and we pulled up to this house. It was just outside of campus. And I saw an older gentleman with a pickup truck moving furniture, like a bed, a couch, and I thought, oh God, please don't let that be her dad. My heart was pounding, and I thought, how can I possibly go up to this man if that's her dad? I mean, there's no way that could be who that is. And then the budding journalist inside of me thought, oh, please let that be her dad. Because what an amazing interview that would be if I actually got him to talk to me. So with my heart pounding, I walked up to him, I introduced myself, I said, I'm Amy Robach with University News. And I understand a young woman died last night, an overdose of ecstasy from what I read in the paper. Are you related to her? Do you know her? And he looked at me and he said, I'm her father. And I swallowed and I said, sir, I want to do a story on your daughter. This will go into every dorm room tonight at 5 o'clock. And if one person who sees what happened to your daughter decides not to do drugs tonight, maybe her death won't be in vain. And his lips started shaking, and I got emotional, and he said, I'll do it. And I sat down with him, and he cried, and I cried, and I remember racing back to the newsroom, putting the story together, and feeling this incredible responsibility, and yet at the same time I felt so honored that he trusted me with this story. I get emotional now because that was the day that I knew I was going to be a journalist, and nothing else. No script, no nothing could be as powerful as telling real stories and having a real impact on the community. My fellow students who saw that, I'd like to think that someone decided not to do drugs that night because they saw my story. One person's story can change one life, hundreds of lives, thousands of lives. And I really felt it that day. Journalism is a calling. I believe that because it called me. And while I personally get a lot out of the job I do every day, it's what I give to the job each day that makes me feel good about what I do for a living. Knowing that when I go into work, I can make a difference is a tremendous feeling. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. I remember Hazinski telling our class, When you walk into your first newsroom, you should decide ahead of time how much of your soul you're willing to sell. And it's absolutely true. There are many compromises to be made on many different levels. I've been in many an argument with a news director about how to cover a story, what stories to cover, what words I choose to describe certain situations. And I have always stuck to my guns. And there have been very tough moments, but at the end of the day, I want to look in the mirror and know that I did right by the people whose story I told. And I feel very strongly that that's something you have to decide before you walk into your first newsroom and say, I'm going to follow my heart and trust my gut. Because in the end, especially when you're in front of the camera, you are the last line of defense. You are the final filter. And you own what comes out of your mouth. And no one else can put those words in your mouth for you. So I really want to stress for all of you who are heading into this career to be strong and to voice your opinion, and don't let someone make you think that sensational is better, because it's not. Stories are powerful enough if you tell them correctly. You don't have to tell them sensationally. I have a very specific example. I was a reporter. I was 26 years old. I had made it to Washington, D.C., remarkably, and I had a very interesting first role. I was the helicopter reporter, and I wanted desperately never to become the chopper chick. And so I was, I'm going to be hard news, crime. We covered murders, we covered fires, we covered anything other than traffic, because I just didn't want to, that's just not what I wanted to do. And so I remember we were flying over the Potomac. There was a car that was pulled off along one of the bridges. And there was a mild backup, and my photographer Pete was zooming around to try to figure out, who's the driver of this car? Why is this car pulled off in the middle of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge? And all of a sudden we saw something in the Potomac, and it was a body. And we zoomed in, and he was floating. And my very young, eager executive producer got in my ear and said, "Oh my gosh, we're coming to you right now." And doing the helicopter was tremendous, because you have very little information. You got to talk over live video. They want it to be compelling and exciting, so they were just very, very riled up that we had this body and we were over it, and no one else had a helicopter. And in my mind, immediately, I said, this is a suicide. I mean, the guy obviously pulled over and jumped off the bridge, and I'm not covering a suicide. It's absolutely against everything I believe in. We don't cover suicides. We don't cover bomb scares, bomb threats, because you don't obviously want to encourage anyone or glorify something that should not be encouraged. So I got onto the microphone with Keith, and I was like, "No, we're not doing this. This is absolutely a suicide, or until we get more information, there's no way I'm gonna do this." He's like, "We're coming to you." I was like, "No, you're not." And I could control what fed into the newsroom, and my heart was pounding, and I put up color bars. I knew he couldn't take me. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm totally getting fired." Totally getting fired. And so I came back into the station that day, because I anchored the news at noon as well, and my news director called me in, Catherine Green. She was like, "Amy, I want to talk to you about what happened this morning." I was like, "Oh, here we go, I'm getting fired." And she said, "You made the right call, thank you. That was the right thing to do. We should not have taken that shot. And I applaud you for knowing that at the age of 26. And I would absolutely give credit to my education here, the many media ethics classes I took, and knowing that there are just moments when you have to stand up for what you believe in, and that was one of them for me, and I remember that to this day. Something else Kaczynski told me in class, he said, "Take the first job you get doing what you love, no matter how small the market." And so I took the first job I was offered in front of the camera, and I got really lucky because it was Charleston, South Carolina. Market 107, and I remember I started out at $22,000 a year, which was my age. I was making my age. I was so proud of that. I was like, woohoo! WCBD TV2 Action News, back to you, Russ and Nina. And people ask me, it's probably the question I get asked most by young people your age, how did you do it? How did you get from Market 107 to network news? I didn't know anybody. My dad didn't know anybody. I had zero connection to anyone or any organization. And I'd like to think that talent has something to do with it. Right place, right time clearly has something to do with it as well. But I truly believe in the magic of good old-fashioned hard work. I was the first one in, and I was almost always the last one to leave. In fact, I became a running joke at WCBD, TV2 Action News. When people were asked to do double shifts, triple shifts, they'd say, who do you think I am, Amy? It wasn't necessarily fun to be the butt of everyone's joke. And eventually, my mom might argue this with me, I learned the power of no. But I actually believe you have to earn the power of no. Because you should say yes to everything. Because if you don't, someone else will. And if you aren't in it to go after all of those big stories and sometimes pull those triple shifts and work 7 days a week, then you probably shouldn't get into journalism. Because it really is, as I said, a calling, a passion, and it's not a 9-to-5 job. This is a job for a very unique kind of person. When we would have interns come in, we'd be like, 5 minutes, never gonna last. Like, you just knew if someone had a news personality or not. And you'd see the excitement in their eyes when a story broke, even if it meant working an 18-hour shift or traveling and staying at the Motel 6 with crickets coming in your room and very non-glamorous situations, sleeping in parking lots in the middle of hurricanes because all the hotels have been evacuated and living off of beef jerky and peeing in sinks. I'm not even kidding. That's what happens when toilets don't work. You have to be constantly curious. You just have to have a natural curiosity. You should love adventure. You should love to work long hours. And you should prepare yourself for missed holidays, ruined vacations. Most of mine have been ruined, and that is a fact. In newsrooms, people actually brag about how many vacation days they leave on the table. Like, really? Because I didn't take 15 of my days. I mean, it's like a badge of honor. It's crazy. I can't think of any other industry where that happens, but that happens. And I have to break it to you, there isn't a lot of money in this career for a large part of your career. So you should love ramen noodles and boxed wine. And it actually works, the no money thing, because you can't afford to take vacations anyway. So it all just kind of works out. One of the main responsibilities we have as journalists is to be honest. But I learned the hard way early on in my career, there is such a thing as being too honest. My first job, WCBD, TV2 Action News. One of my first real, breaking news situations was reports of a downed plane in Berkeley County. And all my other reports up till now, I had, scripted it out perfectly. My live shot, I knew exactly what I was gonna say. I memorized it, I had it on my piece of paper. I had never really ad-libbed or gone to a breaking scene and just had to report what I saw. And the thought of that was pretty nerve-wracking. But we get to the scene with just a few minutes to spare. We're going on live for the 11 o'clock news. Fire trucks, there were police officers everywhere, there were search crews. Basically, there have been several eyewitness reports that a plane had gone down. People had heard what they thought was impact. So everyone was searching for this mysterious plane. And Russ McCaskey threw to me, and I thought I did a pretty good job of setting the scene. And in fact, I did a good enough job that the producer said, hey, we're gonna come back to you for an update at the end of the broadcast. I was like, whew, okay, this is great. And I had my thing kind of prepared, what I was gonna say, and Russ threw to me, Amy, is there anything new to report? No, Russ, there is no new news to report. I actually said that. And then, that year on the Christmas reel, they looped that over and over and over. So they would cut to other bloopers and they'd go back, no, Russ, there is no new news to report. I did go on to describe the scene, but I just could have left out that first part. I didn't need to actually be so literal in my answer. And the good news is I made my mistakes in Market 107. Most of them. I mean, I still obviously mess up, but big mistakes were made in small markets, which I think is actually very advantageous for one's career. And it was also, again, before the internet, so YouTube really wasn't around. I can't imagine going through that now, because there's a lot of extra pressure on all of you, because sometimes, I mean, I don't even know where all those tapes are where I royally screwed up. Thank goodness they're somewhere probably, and no one knows how to play them anyway. Thank goodness. So to review, so far I've shared with you that to become a successful journalist, you should believe in the power of one person's story. You should be curious. You should not enjoy vacations, downtime, or money. You should be honest, but not unnecessarily honest. Which leads me to the next job requirement. You have to be brave. You have to be fearless, or stupid, or a little bit of both. Because I'm not sure flying in a Cessna piloted by a 10-year-old the day after a 10-year-old crashed the plane and killed everyone on board is necessarily brave. I think it's just stupid. But that's when you just say, yes, I'll do it, sure. Will that make for a good story on the weekend news for 2 minutes? I'll risk my life. But you're asked to do that repeatedly, I'll be honest. I can rattle off a few of my assignments and you can decide if I was brave or stupid. I landed and catapulted off of an aircraft carrier on an F-18 fighter jet, breaking the sound barrier, pulling 7 Gs, and being drown-proof by the Navy, where I cried like a baby. Really, I cried like a baby. I mean, it's not fun being drown-proofed. When ice road trucking in the Arctic Circle with a 70-ton truck going over frozen lakes that are only frozen deeply enough 3 weeks out of the year to handle that weight, and you could feel the waves underneath and the ice cracking. I went on that happily. I've been in a prison as a riot has broken out. I have been in drug-infested areas as shots rang out. Physically attacked in the middle of court by an angry family member, thrown onto a car by the bodyguard of the KKK Grand Dragon, Horace King. I've been on Blackhawks and Hueys, landed on a 3,000-foot runway in the middle of the North Atlantic where we broke our landing gear on a C-17 with a whale on board. Yep, that happened. But you know, the physical stuff actually isn't the hard part. It's the emotional bravery that this job requires often. One of my first assignments as well in Charleston, local news is great, by the way. I mean, I can't think of a better way to feel good about what I do every day and feel confident about what I do every day than having had that local news experience, because there's nothing I couldn't do after I did 8 years of local news. So I'm a huge fan of doing everything. But this story, I was not yet a mother. I was really young, and I was out in rural South Carolina, and there was a missing boy, a missing 2-year-old, Yusef Yunus. It's amazing the stories and the names you remember. And this one stands out to me. We spent 2 days out there searching, searching, searching. There was a Mother's Day celebration, and this little boy just disappeared. And there was so much family there, and the parents were so convinced that he was just lost in the woods somewhere, that he would never go near this creek that went around his house. And I was with the mother, talking with her when the police came up and told her that they had found his body, that he had drowned. And she fell to her knees, and there was this guttural, animal-like sound that came out of her mouth. And it shook me to the core. And those are the moments when you think, okay, if I'm going to be covering these horrible stories, there has to be a moral to the story. There has to be something that I can pass along, the greater good. And you know, that story, we did several follow-ups about. That's when accidents happen, when someone always thinks someone else is watching the children. You know, whatever celebration, whether it's a pool party or a Mother's Day celebration or a birthday party, that's when you have to be extra vigilant. And that's when you take your journalism and you say, I gotta make sense of something that is absolutely senseless. And that's when your role comes in and your responsibility comes in to not just go for the sensationalist moment, but to really have a teachable moment. Create your story so that it serves the greater good. And that's how I tried to look at every story I did, good, bad, and ugly, because you're the eyes and ears of everyone else who isn't there, who can't be there. And there are times when it's tough to find the teachable moment. There are times when it's just your job to report what happened and you let other people decide. One of my toughest assignments kind of just came up in a lottery. I was a crime reporter, and I was asked to witness an execution. And I didn't know how I was going to feel about it. It was lethal injection, and I thought, you know, it's fine, I'll handle it. This man had been on death row for 18 years. He had been convicted of a triple homicide. And I went to the Broad River Correctional Facility in Columbia, South Carolina, and we all had to take a vow of silence. Walked into the room, there was a red curtain, they opened it up, and when the lethal injection process began, almost instantaneously, this man, his name was Sammy, his chest shot up and he started gurgling, that he was making this awful noise. And I thought he was just going to go to sleep. And his pastor was sitting next to me. He started hyperventilating and had to leave the room. And I turned 3 shades of white. I mean, I looked as white as a ghost. And I had to go out then after I watched this man die and give a press conference and then do a story about it. And there were protesters everywhere, anti-death penalty protests going around. And that was one of the toughest moments for me as a journalist, because I have a very strong feeling about the death penalty. And to just give the facts as they were and let the people who were watching decide what they thought of what happened that day. It was very important to me to be objective, but it was a very difficult thing for me to witness and to report on. You heard, you mentioned the DC serial sniper story. That was incredibly difficult for me. I was 8 months pregnant with my first daughter, and it was terror. There were these 2 men, well, at the time we didn't know who it was, shooting people at gas stations, shooting people at grocery stores, shooting people waiting for the bus, and no one knew when they were going to strike next. And people were zigzagging into the grocery stores. I had my big 6'4", 300-pound cameraman ducking behind the door while we were gassing up, because everyone was afraid they were going to be a target at any moment. And I'll never forget, I was pregnant, and it was a Saturday night, and my husband and I were trying to do some last-minute home renovations before the baby came, and I thought, let's not go to the Home Depot in DC because it's a clear shot. Like, you were literally deciding where you were going based on whether or not you thought the sniper had a clear shot. It was crazy. And so I said, let's go to the one in 7 Corners because there's a covered parking garage there, and we can just get in and out, and there won't be a clear shot. And so we parked. I actually watched as my husband loaded everything up, and then we got in the car and left. 24 hours later, around 2 o'clock in the morning, I got woken up, like, get to the 7 Corners, Home Depot, there's been another shooting. And I was like, what? And when I got there, I kid you not, it was exactly where my husband and I had been 24 hours earlier, she was shot at 9 o'clock, the FBI agent, and she was standing out while her husband was loading up the car. And I was so upset, I actually went into labor. And I had to go, like, within like the next 12 hours, I had to spend the night at the hospital at Georgetown while they stopped my contractions, because I couldn't believe that this had happened right where I had been 24 hours early, and now I'm having to report on it, and I was a wreck. So there are moments when you have to take a step back and you have to say, okay, this is too personal, and it's a crazy thing to be covering something like that and you're living it at the same time. And that's part of what you'll deal with when you get out there and you're covering stories. There are some stories that involve you, that affect you, that you're actually living and experiencing, and yet you still have to find a way to figure out how to be professional. That I did have to take a break for a day, but I was back the next day, 24 hours later, back on the job and covering it all the way through to the very end. And for me, the hardest story I can tell you I've ever covered in my life was my personal 9/11 as a parent, was Newtown, Connecticut. I had a first grader, and it just made it all the more real for me. I had just finished a long, hard week. It was a Friday, much like today. I had been filling in for Robin, and I was on a 2020 story when I got a phone call that they believed as many as 20 students had been shot in the school in Connecticut. And I thought, can't be right. I mean, you know, we get a lot of crazy, inflated initial reports that don't turn out to be true or real. And they said, drop what you're doing, head out to Newtown right now. And so we sped out there. And the next day I found myself in the home of Jessica Ricos, one of the little girls who had been shot and killed. And it was very surreal. I'm standing, you know, that initial dad that I went up and talked to when I was here in Athens, sadly, I used those skills and that experience over and over and over and over again in my career, having to talk to people who have just experienced the unthinkable, the worst possible tragedy, losing a child. It just is. And I'm in their living room, and the grandparents have come, and it's just such a surreal scene. And this sweet couple is about to sit down and talk with me, and they wanted to talk with me because they wanted their daughter to not just be a number. And that's so often the motivation for people to talk during tragedies. They either want to affect some sort of change or to make sure it doesn't happen again, but they also just want people to remember their loved ones. And it's your job to make sure you tell their stories well, with the right emotion and with the right amount of respect and honor. And I saw a baby picture of her. It was right before we went on camera, and it just thought popped in my head. I said, when was she born? And the mother told me May 10th, 2006. And I let out a gasp, and I had to leave the room because that is the day I gave birth to my daughter, Annalise. And to know that my daughter was in her school, safe, hopefully. Her daughter was in a morgue, and we had given birth on the exact same day to our little girls. I broke down. I had to go to the bathroom. I had to collect myself. And when I came back in to do the interview, I've never in my life been worried about the audio because of my stifled sobs. But I actually was concerned I was ruining the audio because I physically could not control how my body was reacting listening to these parents talk about the Christmas gifts they had just bought Jessica, the fact that they had slept in her bed last night because they wanted to still smell her. They could still smell her in her sheets, and how she had run to the school when she had heard that there was a situation. In her mind, she was like, I'm coming for you, baby, I'm coming to get you, only to be put into another room with several other parents to ultimately find out her daughter had died. It was surreal. And I spent 8 days there, and it was a very, very, very difficult story for me to cover. And it changed me. It changed me as a journalist, it changed me as a parent. And the more stories you cover, both good and bad, it should change you. And the compassion and the empathy that you feel when you meet and you're in these families' homes, and I almost feel like I should have gotten a psychology minor, because really, in a way, you're like the therapist, and you're asking these questions that you can't believe you're asking, but what you're getting from them is actually fairly beautiful. The fact that they're so vulnerable, so open, and so willing to communicate and connect, and hopefully, obviously, these parents were all about gun control, making sure this doesn't happen again. There's a lot of issues involving mental health in this country, so there's a lot of big, heady, weighty topics that need to be discussed, and it's through these awful tragedies that it's your job to move people, to change people's minds, to make people think about things in ways that they hadn't before, and it's these difficult stories that really make the world shift. And it is a hard thing to do, you know, to be that person, to be that objective person, to keep your wits about you and to keep your composure. My mom's always told me that tears are powerful, and I believe that. And tears move people. And I always tell people, don't, you know, they always say I'm sorry when they start crying. I'm like, don't say you're sorry. That is what oftentimes makes the difference. You also mentioned that I interviewed Malala. It is one of my favorite interviews I have ever done in my life. Malala, part of her face was paralyzed from the bullet that ricocheted actually off of her shoulder. That ultimately saved her life. It was unbelievable an unbelievable situation that she wasn't killed in that moment because she was shot in point blank range. But she was there in Nigeria, and she met with Goodluck Jonathan, the president of Nigeria there, and we were allowed to go along with her and also interview 4 of the girls who had escaped Boko Haram. The problem about doing an interview in Nigeria is that it's Nigeria, and Boko Haram is everywhere. And we had several meetings about how we were going to deal with this security-wise, because in that country, the only people who are allowed to carry weapons are members of the military. And the military is infiltrated by Boko Haram. And so the Malala Fund had to spend a lot of time trying to vet which members of the military would be guarding all of us, Malala, me, the kidnapped girls, because if you can imagine, those would all be very high-value targets for any one of them. And there had been bombings throughout Nigeria around the World Cup, and we were there for the World Cup, so there was a lot of concern about our safety. And I remember when we were doing this interview, there was barbed wire all around, and I started looking, and everywhere I looked, there was a guy with an AK-47, and you just have to say, I hope we got the right ones. I hope we picked the right guards. I hope it all works out. And it obviously did, because I'm standing here today. But she told me, and I love this quote, she said the Taliban tried to silence one girl, and instead they heard the voices of hundreds of thousands. And it brought me back to that theme that I have found following me throughout my entire career, the power of one voice. And that's what I want you all to remember as journalism students. You know, even something that seems like a silly, innocuous story can have a tremendous impact, because your audience is they're all looking for connection. Everybody wants to feel connected with one another and wants to be moved. And so every story should be treated as important as the next. I really believe that. And I had no idea just how personal that concept of one voice, one story would be for me personally. Last year, in September of 2013, I was actually in Amish country. I was covering Marie Monville. She is the wife of the Amish shooter. It happened back in 2007, I believe. Her husband, a devoted father of 3, seemingly fine, one day decided to walk into an Amish schoolhouse and shoot 10 schoolgirls, execution style, 5 of whom died, and then shot himself. And this woman was left with the aftermath of it all, still living among her Amish neighbors, who all came to show her support that very night after they had lost children. It's a tremendous community, and to witness the love and forgiveness that they have there is something to behold, which she personally experienced, her children experienced, but she hadn't ever spoken about it publicly. She wrote a book, and she gave us the first network interview. So I'm about to sit down and do this really big interview about a very tough subject with a woman. I know it's going to be emotional, so I'm gearing up, and I get an email from ABC saying, hey, we have an assignment, a sensitive assignment we'd like to talk to you about. You know, can you give us a call? And I thought, I'm in the kitchen, I'm about to go, like I couldn't stand it. I had to go outside and find out what they wanted me to do. I was like, sensitive assignment, what could that be? And Sandra Aiken, the producer, said to me, hey, you know, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we really want to go big. GMA goes pink. And we're going to have a mammovan outside of Times Square. We're going to have women getting mammograms. And we would like you to have the first ever, we believe, live televised mammogram. I was like, what? Did you just say you wanted me to do a mammogram on live television? No. And she was like, wait, just please, you know, don't tell me no, just think about it. I was like, okay, well, I'm in the middle of something completely different right now. I can't even think about this. She's like, just don't say no, just let me talk to you tomorrow when you get back to New York. So I did the interview with Marie, but I have to tell you, it probably wasn't smart for me to do that phone call, because then that was in my head half the time. And when I got back to New York, Sandra found me and she said, look, back to the power of one, you know, you're 40, she's never had a mammogram, right? I was like, no, I actually lost my prescription. And she said, you're exactly the person who we want to do this, because how many other women are out there just like you, putting off having their mammogram, who don't want to get it done for a million different reasons. If they see you go in there and do it and demystify it and say it wasn't that bad, it didn't hurt that much, it'll have a tremendous impact. And so she started to wear me down a little bit. I'm like, I mean, the truth is, I think all of us in this room got into journalism, are getting into journalism to have an impact, to make a difference. So I thought, oh, we'll see, she knew exactly where to get me, because then I felt like, okay, maybe I need to reconsider this. So I decided to go into Robert's dressing room. She's a breast cancer survivor, thriver. And I went into her office and I said, Robin, can I talk to you? They're asking me if I'd be willing to do a mammogram on live television next week. And she went, ha, you're the one they asked? And I said, yes. And I don't think I'm the one who should do it, because I have no family history. I'm perfectly healthy. I feel weird. I don't have a sister or a mother or a grandmother who had breast cancer. So I just feel like it's disingenuous. And I'm a big believer in authenticity and sincerity. And I just felt like maybe it would look like I was pulling a stunt, because we've seen over the years a lot of broadcasters like, look at me getting this exam. And I just didn't. It's not me, and I didn't want to be that person, and I was afraid people were going to say that I was turning it into me television, and I didn't want to be a distraction, to be honest. And she said to me, I actually think you're the perfect person, because I know you won't be like that. You won't make it into a sideshow. You'll be sincere, and I really believe, she said, Amy, I believe that if you walk into that mammo van, and you do that mammogram, and I know it's going to be uncomfortable physically and emotionally, that you will save a life. Someone will go and get their mammogram who wouldn't have otherwise, and they will find out that they had cancer, and it'll be worth it. And when she said that to me, I got chills from head to toe. And I said, okay, you just convinced me, I'm going to do it. And so, as the story goes, I did it. And standing in that room, I obviously had no idea that the life I was about to save was my own, because that mammogram led to a breast cancer diagnosis for me. And I couldn't have been more shocked. I was the last person in the world, I thought, who could have cancer. It's funny, you do these stories about statistics, and I had a 1% chance of having cancer. So even when I was sitting in that room getting follow-up tests, I thought, this is ridiculous. This is why the big debate goes on about mammograms at 40, because you get the dense breast tissue, you have unnecessary exams and tests, and you have all of this anxiety, and this is ridiculous. And sure enough, I had breast cancer, and I had 2 malignant tumors in my breast, and it had already spread to my lymph nodes. So time was not on my side. And if I had waited longer, my prognosis would probably be a lot worse. The great thing about where I took it from there, then you've got this big decision. Do I share this? Do I become the story? It was never my thing, and it's not an easy thing to do, because I can tell you, and having done a lot of interviews, I much prefer to be the person asking the question than being the one answering the questions. I don't like that other side of it. But I felt like the whole reason why I got into journalism was public service. And the whole reason why I decided to have that mammogram was, it was an altruistic thing. I did not want to do it. And I thought, for me to stop now and to not then share my story defeats the whole purpose, because I knew once I told our viewers that I had breast cancer, that more lives would be saved. Because anyone who didn't go out and get their mammogram before, when they heard what happened to me, I knew thousands of women would be calling their doctor that day. And that is exactly what happened. I have more than a dozen letters from women who have told me that they found their own breast cancer because of my story. And you know what? It's funny, the story I didn't want to do, the story I was running away from, it turned out to be the story that has had by far the most impact than anything else I've done. And it's my proudest moment as a journalist. As scary as it was, as scary as it still is, because once you put yourself out there, you open yourself up for criticism and critiques, and I've had lots of awful things said and written about me in terms of how I've handled it or what I've said or what I've done. And in this era that you all, of journalism, you are about to embark on, it's a lot harder now than it was even for me 20 years ago. Sometimes I think it's funny, we'll all sit around the desk at Good Morning America and we'll all talk about the latest mean tweet we got. I mean, it's bad. People are really awful. And it's crazy because we could be sitting on the set and I could be reading this horrible thing that someone just said about me. I'm like, ah! And then you have to not let it affect you. It's very different than you get the letter and you open it up and it's 2 weeks later. We're on the set, oh wow, I guess I look tired today. And it's right, but they do constantly. So we'll laugh and sometimes we have little competitions, who had the worst tweet of the day. But then it's a shared experience, we're all in it together, we all get criticized equally, pretty much. But I also want to say this, because when I first started out, we had all day to make sure we got our facts right, to double check, triple check, make sure we had the right tone, make sure we had, all the correct sources, and I am a stickler for all of that. I have to say I've never been successfully sued, and I'm proud of that. I've been sued, but not successfully. And now, you can upload something onto Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and in a second, millions of people may have seen it. And if you don't get it right, I think now more than ever, making sure that we have the correct tone, correct perspective, that is more important now than it ever was before, even when I was coming up through school, because if you're first, it doesn't matter if you're not right. Getting the information correct and making sure you're telling an honest, full account of what happened is the most important thing that you can do as a journalist. And I know it's fun to post pictures, and but we all have to have filters, and it's so important to know where to draw the line. And I've always prided myself on my filter, and maybe even so much so, I know everyone likes to scream at each other on TV. I survived 5 years of cable news, and I don't think I ever got made fun of by Jon Stewart, which I think is pretty amazing. But you just, I think at the end of the day, you have to not go for the easy story or the easy way out and say, oh, I'll get a lot of likes, I'll get a lot of retweets, whatever. It's not about that. It's about being correct. It's about having the right perspective. It's about making sure the right information gets out to the correct audience. Something I always have told myself, I think I started right at the beginning, right before I went on air, and I get really, really nervous. I would always say to myself, say what you mean what you say. And now I add something to that phrase. Say what you mean what you say, and make sure there's meaning to what you say. Thank you. And it's an honor to be here tonight, and I wish you all the best. And I'm sure, I don't think we have the mechanism for asking questions, but if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask away, because I've probably experienced something somewhere that could shed some light on what you wonder will be out there waiting for you. And there's a lot out there, good and bad. But I stand here today saying I have the best job in the world. And I'm excited for all of you to start out on your careers, because it is phenomenally rewarding. And if you stay true to yourself and you have the right heart and the right head, you'll do great. Thank you.